Duke, you suck.
You shut your mouth!
Welcome to the Duke You Suck podcast. And now, Duke Durango.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Duke You Suck podcast. I am extremely honored today that a wrestling legend is giving a complete duster his time to speak with us today. Nikita Koloff, welcome to the show. I am so proud and honored to have you on my little podcast. Thank you so much.
Hey, no podcast is too little, okay, Jordan? So just an honor to be here. And of course, the man of the hour, the tower power, too sweet to be sour since Dusty has left us. Dwayne, it's great to have him here with us as well.
Yeah, Dwayne, I apologize, man. I'm so nervous right now. I was telling Dwayne, I don't get nervous, man.
Okay.
I'm so nervous. Yeah, and Dwayne,
Don't be nervous. Don't be nervous. It's all good, my brother.
Yeah. And Dwayne, thank you very much for facilitating this, man. Dwayne and I have known, geez, I don't know. It seems like I don't remember a time now when I didn't know Dwayne anymore. Like so yeah. Thank you very much, Dwayne. Thanks for coming.
Well, it was, and George, just so you know, I mean, in meeting and we could talk about all this on one of the best tours I've ever been on across Canada in 2017, where I met Dwayne and his beautiful family, and of course that's led to these number of years later now. Building a friendship and this relationship and leading up to this interview. So thank you, Dwayne. Thank you for Jordan for having me tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll be honest. I grew up watching Stampede Wrestling in our area. We didn't get NWA. So your career is something that I picked up much later on. I was already training at the dungeon and stuff, and to be honest, the internet wasn't quite a thing yet even. So I wasn't a tape trader. So I didn't see your career until I was what I consider smartened up to the business. And so one of the reasons I want to have Dwayne here is as we talk about kind of you're going through the business is Dwayne watched it live. He watched it as a kid. He watched it through different eyes than I did. So I kind of want to hear his perspective as you talk, if that's okay as well.
But hey, that'd be great. I mean, because he's posting stuff all the time about my career. He's teaching me things that I didn't know about. So I'm grateful. But hey, I should be interviewing you for my podcast, man. All about the Stu Hart in the dungeon. We're gonna have to do that sometime, Jordan.
Anytime, man. That was a badge of honor for me to get stretched by Stu. So yeah, that was. It was. I'll tell you this: at 82, I could have still ran away from him. But once he got his hands on you, you weren't getting away.
I can only imagine. In fact, in that tour across Canada, we actually went out to the heart. We went out there. We didn't. I don't recall us getting that close to the house. I don't guess you can get that close anymore. But I did have to go out by it for posterity to see it. And of course, I did get to meet. We honored a lot of the Hart family the night we were in Calgary, and it was an awesome memory.
Yeah, that place is. You go in there, and I would always get butterflies before going in the dungeon because I didn't grow up. I grew up watching Stampede Wrestling, not other wrestling. So when I went there, and let's stop talking about me right now. But I would get butterflies always going in because you kind of realize like the guys I grew up watching, the Davies, the Dynamites, the Bretts, all the Japanese, they all came through that dungeon. So I was just like, I was always just goosebumps going in that place.
No, that's amazing. That's amazing. So
now I'm just gonna roll it all the way back. As far back as I kind of read, it was basically back when you were playing. You came up through high school with a group of legends that is unbelievable. I did not realize that. Like when you were playing football, there's 6 legends that you played football with.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy when you think about it. My joke is it must have been all the minerals in the water tower in Robbinsdale, Minnesota.
Right.
I don't know. I really don't know what the answer is other than to say just the way it worked out because none of us really entertained an idea back then. I mean, we knew that Kurt's dad, Larry the Axe Henning, wrestled. We knew that, but nobody, to my knowledge, nobody really made a big deal of that. Yeah, he'd be in the stands on Friday night watching us, under the Friday night lights. But to even consider or look back and go, did we talk about, hey, one day we want to be a professional wrestler? No, those conversations never came up.
That's interesting. And then the other question I had as I was kind of reading your bio was, how good was that football team?
I could ask that question a lot, and one would think with guys like Rick Root, Kurt Hennig, Barry Darsow, Nikita Koloff, and others on the team, John Nord, that we would have been state champions. Unfortunately, and for those novice football players out there, you can't just have good or great players. You can, but it also takes coaching. It takes coaching. And unfortunately, we had in my view, looking back, a mediocre coaching staff. And that is the reason we were really not much better than a 500, win as many games as we lost ball club.
Oh, that's too bad. That's really too bad. Because I'm looking
it is. I mean, individually we stood, individually we stood out, but collectively as a team, we just didn't have the coaching.
Right. And then then you transitioned from there. You were going to try out for the USFL, which is something I don't know if I'm fortunate, but I'm fortunate enough to know about it anyways. And then what were your injuries that led, you kind of got injured at, I apologize, Second University escapes me.
Morehead State University.
Yeah. And then you were going to go to the USFL. Did you need an agent or anything for that? Or were you just, you were kind of going to walk on and see what happened?
Yeah. I mean, originally, of course, my sights, even as a youngster, as a 12, 13, 14-year-old, was to play in the NFL.
Right.
And it's a teaching point for anyone, including your viewers and listeners who will dial into this show, is in life we're just going to be faced with setbacks. There isn't any one of us that's not going to at some point or juncture, most likely in our life, be faced with a setback. And I had not one but two in my college days. One my freshman year in college, one my senior year in college, right, where I had fractured my lower leg, both the tibia and the fibula. So I fractured both bones, broke in half. I was determined to come back after my freshman year and play, which I did 3 more years, only to fracture my other leg my senior year. And our team was, identical fractures, both legs, 4 years apart.
What are the odds of that?
Right, correct, exactly. However, the teaching point is you can let a setback hold you back, or you can use it as motivation for a comeback. And so the whole idea of the USFL was I was rehabilitating the second fractured leg. And actually, believe it or not, it was a man named Gordon Soley. Ever heard of that name?
Yeah, 100%.
It was a man named Gordon Soley who had met through the Road Warriors, Animal and Hawk, down in Atlanta, that helped me secure a tryout with the USFL. So I had no agent.
Okay. Didn't
know that I really needed an agent at that point.
Right.
I was just going to train, walk on, and hope to make the team. And here's a bit of irony for you. Jordan, had I gone through with and tried out, you may or may not know this, but on that football team at the time were 2 guys named Ron Simmons and Lex Luger.
Oh, jeez.
I would have met those guys prior to ever even getting into pro wrestling. I didn't meet him until later on in pro wrestling.
Right.
But how about that? Had I actually went down to Tampa and tried out, I would have met them way before a wrestling career.
That's wild. That is so wild. And then a fateful call from Joe Laurinaitis. Now,
a call from Joe Laurinaitis. I bypassed the football tryout. I end up in professional wrestling, and to later both meet and wrestle with and against Ron Simmons and Lex Luger. So I never went against him on the gridiron, but I did go against him in the squared circle.
You worked a big program with Lex, right? It was part of the Four Horsemen.
Oh, yeah. And Ron and I had quite a number of matches as well.
Right. And what was the big factor in your decision to move away from football and get into wrestling? Was it a money thing, or was it, you know, you were just kind of done with football, or?
No, it was, I mean, the tryout was still months away.
Right.
And timing, you know, timing is everything if you take advantage of the opportunity of the timing.
100%.
And so when Joe called me and shared with me the storyline of a nephew for Ivan Koloff, I'd already spent some time with them and around them in the back of you know, in the locker rooms of arenas and watching those guys perform.
Right.
I still was not, at that point, had not entertained the idea of me getting involved. But when he shared the idea with me, I thought, well, you know, if they could do it, if Animal and Hawk could do it, I could probably do it as well. And I thought, what have I got to lose? If it doesn't work out, I still got a football tryout lined up, and I'll go play football. And of course, anyone who's an avid wrestling fan knows the course of history that and what happened.
Yeah, the rest is history. I mean, and that's, again, not growing up watching the way Dwayne did. I was blown away, and I don't mean to just blow sunshine. I'm not kind of somebody that's like that, but I was 100% blown away with everything you accomplished in like 9-10 years. That was insane to me.
Well, yeah, and Dwayne could kind of probably give us some of those highlights, but he and I really appreciate that, Jordan. But even more so than that, when I look back on my career, let's just take the first 13 months, let alone a 9 or 10-year career, right?
Yeah.
Let's just take the first 13 months. Within 13 months, with catch this for your audience, with no amateur wrestling background. So, you know, I didn't have a background like a Stu Hart, let's just say, or Brett or any of the rest. So no amateur wrestling background, none, zero. No professional training. So I didn't go to a dungeon. Other than the mock dungeon that Ivan and I set up. But prior to the launch of my career, I didn't go to a training camp, a professional school, or any of that. Right. I just had a 5-minute phone call with a promoter named Jim Crockett, who said to be in his office on a certain day. And from that 5-minute phone call, I just showed up the day he said to be there with no questions asked and without another conversation with him.
Wow.
And I walked in, he took a look at me. He walked out, walked back in with two guys, the NWA World Tag Team Champions, Don Kernodle, Ivan Koloff, and said, take a look at your new partner. Nikita Koloff is born in the hallways of Charlotte, North Carolina. They instantly put me on the interview set and then told me to be in Raleigh the next night, that I'd be wrestling on television, having never stepped in a ring. And fast forward 13 months to the first ever Great American Bash. I'm already the World Tag Team Champion, the World Six-Man Champion, and I'm wrestling this blonde-haired guy. Woo! Nature Boy Ric Flair for the World Heavyweight title, all within 13 months.
Wow. So that I don't want, like, that's an overnight success. Like, really and truly, you hate to, you know, I mean, there was a lot of work in 13 months, and I do not want to minimize that because it was different back then. But that's a fast 13 months.
It was, and like Ivan always used to tell me. Now, even though I didn't have any training prior to that, you know, obviously he looked at me and said, you know, you paid your dues in other ways. I mean, obviously in the gym, you paid your dues in the gym as an athlete on the gridiron, on a football field.
You're still a monster, for crying out loud. Look at the shape you're in.
Well, I'm trying to stay in shape. I'm trying to keep up with Dwayne. I'm trying to stay in shape.
You're jacked.
I appreciate it. But so listen, so for 2 or 3 months from that debut that night, when I had, you know, an 11-second win on television, Ivan, Don, and I, to their credit, we would get to the town 2 or 3 hours early. They would bump and thump all over the ring, and I'd learn the mechanics of wrestling. Right. And then I'd have a very short, brief match every night. And I'd sit in the corner and watch their world tag match. And then on the drive home every night, we talk about the psychology, the old school psychology of wrestling. So I had an on-the-job training. And I guess you'd say, Jordan, fortunately, I was a good student, and I learned relatively quick.
You were what we call coachable. Going back to your point earlier.
Coachable and teachable. Yes, sir.
Dwayne, let me ask you now. Do you remember Nikita's debut? Do you remember the run? Like, was it one of those things like, holy cow, look at this guy, just blows on the scene and tears everything apart?
Yeah, I was, of course, I was a fan of Ivan, right? So when Ivan showed up with him, I was like, holy crap. And like you said, jacked. I was like, who is this monster? Because at that time, there was nobody with that physique. The Road Warriors were on the scene, but they were, nobody with Nikita's physique and the look with the bald head, and he just looked like a beast. And it was like, yeah, and it was just like, wow. And then it was just from that point on, he said short matches, and it was like, this guy is dominating. And not knowing what the wrestling was back then, it was like, as a younger guy, it was like, holy crap, this guy's like a modern day superhero, except he's bad. And he's just destroying everybody. He's like the juggernaut, right? Just walking through everybody here, and nobody's going to take him down at all. And it was like fascinating. And then, titles. They just started falling in his lap. And then all the heroes were just getting defeated by him, which was awesome.
Yeah, well, and that was when I was looking at your title history. You never really went longer than a cup of coffee between titles, right? Like you'd drop one title, and 6 weeks later you'd have another one.
Well, yeah, you got a point. I mean, I think the only one longer, at least at that time, and you guys probably have done some homework, or Dwayne probably knows the history. I think the only one longer and that had the U.S. heavyweight title is Lex Luger. And believe me, Lex doesn't let me forget that. But he only had me by about a month. But he goes, it was still a month. 23 days or something. I don't know what it was. But
I bet he can.
And then how long after that the world? Huh?
I bet Lex can tell you every minute longer he held that title. He can tell you the day.
Yeah, and he will pretty soon, because we're going to be together. We co-facilitate, a man camp, a camp for guys, and we talk more about that towards the end. But and so he'll probably bring it up again there at the man camp. But and then right from there, the world TV title, but prior to that, the world tag champion a couple times, world 6-man. I don't even know what, Dwayne, 3 or 4 times. How many times I have the world 6-man title, Dwayne?
4 times. Yeah, 4 times.
I was going to say, don't disappoint us, Dwayne. We know you know.
Yeah, no, we had him with Crusher twice with Ivan, and then Ivan and Don Canuto, and then Baron von Raschke, of all people.
Wow.
That's right. The Russians and the German.
Yep.
Just owning it. So,
yep.
And then you kind of took a break and then made a comeback. And one of the things that struck to me, and if you don't want to, I should have asked you about this earlier, and I do apologize. But it kind of came back and said you came back a little smaller, that, you were using some steroids before and kind of went off them and came back smaller. 2 questions I want to ask. One of them I forgot I wanted to ask you. First and foremost, when you rose as fast as you did you find any resentment in the locker room?
Great question. And the answer would be yes. It wasn't so much in my face, but going back to Ivan was probably hearing more than I was hearing, but Ivan was so affirming, and he was great. I mean, people said, was he really your uncle? Well, in TV land he was, but he was, even off screen, he was as much an uncle as any uncle I had.
Right.
But he was always reassuring. Remember, I went back to how I paid my dues, and he said that you paid your dues in other ways. One of the reasons he would say that to me is, don't let what others are saying or what you're even sensing, let that affect your career. Yeah, yes, there are guys here who paid their dues, for many years in the ring and have not achieved the level of success you've had. But because you've been such a great student and very teachable and coachable, you've risen to the top quickly, and you're able to maintain that level of professionalism. And so don't let that affect you. And so I never really heard it to my face per se that I can recall, but I knew it was around me.
Right. Well, and it was always one of those, there's been times we'd see a guy come in and like, who the hell does this guy think he is? So it was one of those, I was looking back and I was like, I bet for sure there was people talking some mad trash behind his back, because no one was saying look at the size. And you brought, sorry to cut you off. One thing I'll say about this, and guys get mad because a new guy comes in and wins a title and things like that. And for young guys that are breaking into the business, this is important to know. Not everybody is a champion. Lots of guys can work, lots of guys can wrestle, but not everybody's a champion. And you know, you don't need years of seasoning to come in with the intensity that Nikita Koloff came in with.
Well, and not only that, Jordan, you don't, right? You don't necessarily have a title. I mean, a title can help get you over. And by the way, little homework on you. You're pretty legendary yourself up there in Canada. So don't downplay everything here. So anyway,
No.
just don't think I don't know that. But that said,
thank you very much. It's embarrassing.
Hey, it's all good, man. I appreciate your career and what you contributed to the wrestling business as well. But you know, that said, you know, there are guys that, you know, a Roddy Piper, another who you guys know very, very well, right? And who you don't necessarily have a title to get yourself over. I mean, if you can get your character over without a title. Now, a title can certainly enhance your career and success, but you don't have to have that in order to have a stellar career.
Right. Yeah, and that's true too. Some guys don't need a title, right? Like it's, you know.
You don't. You don't. It's not a requirement. You do not have. In fact, you hadn't asked this question. You might, but I'll just go ahead and tell you right now. Since we're talking about titles, I'm probably one of the few guys. I don't know. Maybe the only guy. Maybe we can ask Dwayne. He might know. That actually turned down the NWA World Heavyweight title not once but twice.
Turned it down.
Correct.
Okay, we're gonna have to unpack this a minute, sir.
Okay.
Were these? Can I
you
assume
want me to
these?
Talk about it?
Yeah. What would the reasoning behind it? Because of course most guys get in and they want to be the guy. Do you know what I mean? So what would be your reasoning behind turning it down twice?
So you know, you made a reference to a point of stepping away, and of course we can cover anything prior to my stepping away. And
Sure.
for those who don't know why I stepped away, you know, I was I was main event, right? And I made an executive decision to walk away for a season, if you want to call it a sabbatical. I had a wife at the time, Mandy, who was diagnosed with cancer and suffering with cancer, and which is the reason why I stepped away from the limelight and the main event status to take care of her. I just thought it was the right thing to do, that she should be a priority over my career. And so I walked away to take care of her. For those who don't know, she did eventually pass away at the age of 26. She battled cancer for 2 years. And it wasn't real long. Like, I'm talking a matter of days before the Nature Boy, Ric Flair, who at that point had the title and had the book, and called me up, invited me down to his house in Charlotte. We had a lengthy lunch and conversation at his pool, and he offered me the belt if I would come back. And honestly, I just, you know, mentally didn't feel I was ready to come back at that point in time, and made a ridiculous offer. Okay, if you really want me back, if they want me back, here's a ridiculous offer. Called me up several weeks later, offered it to me a second time, and I think that's about the timeline. But anyway, offered it me a second time, and I said, you know, thank you, but no thank you.
Right.
And then eventually, when I was ready, I did come back, and there you go.
Yeah, and that's I can't commend you enough for being that noble. There's not a lot of people that would. You know, there are a lot of people that would, but there's not a lot of people that at the pinnacle of everything would step away and do that. And then also, maybe people don't understand how important this is, but step away and take the necessary time to grieve until they're prepared to move on to the next step. And I think that's an important thing to note as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And kudos and credit to Bill Apter from Pro Wrestling Illustrated, who wrote a phenomenal article about her and I, and sent the photographers out while she was still alive, and did a whole photo shoot and a whole story for Pro Wrestling Illustrated. That I think the fans, based on fan response, you know, really appreciate it, and as did I. And then, then when I was ready, I made the decision to come back. And you made reference to the fact that I was being small, that I was smaller, and that was intentional as well. You made reference to the steroids early on in my career when I saw it accelerate, in a meteoric rise. It was not long, truthfully, full transparency. It was not long after that I made a decision to no longer felt like I no longer was going to use them. So,
Right.
And it was well before I walked away. So I still maintained my size,
Right.
but while I was away, I trimmed down intentionally. It was still in the gym, but just as I was taking care of her, not working out as intense, but still taking care of myself.
Well, and the reason I ask is, when I was breaking in, it was almost like people just assumed you were going to be this chemistry experiment. As soon as you started training, that you were going to gas up. And I think Dwayne can attest that there was never a time where I was ever considered a big wrestler. That's for sure. And it's one of the things that I hope young guys know they don't have to do. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
Sure, Vince loves the big muscular guys, and I appreciate that on a certain level, but the circus doesn't only travel with elephants. Like there's monkeys and tigers, and so you don't have to take all that shit to make it in the business.
Well, and to that point, for your audience, to that point, if I back up a little bit more, I wasn't I didn't use them to break into wrestling.
Yeah.
Back in the college days, the word on the street was if you wanted to play professional football, if you want to play at that level, that was something you did. And that was why.
That was the 100% truth then, really.
Yeah. And so that's why I considered them because I was that passionate about football. Yeah. And so I just happened to already be trained for football, already on them. And that to say to the young guys out there, that I'm not an advocate of it. Now that's not to say anyone who says they don't work that's just not true.
Yeah. 100%.
But the unfortunate side, Jordan, is for many guys, it becomes they become so psychologically dependent upon them.
Yes.
And the danger is long-term, years down the road, which is why we unfortunately have seen many guys in our profession that I feel anyway have died prematurely, not just from them, but a combination of drugs, right? So
and
by all means, you do not need them.
Yeah, well, it's between that and the recreational drugs. Like to me, that was always a big thing. I was really proud one day when I was sitting in the locker room and one of our guys, forgive my candor, but had some sort of a broken dink, could still wrestle, and he was literally walking through our locker room asking if anybody had a perk. 20 guys in the locker room, not one guy had a Percocet. I got a couple Advil for you, man. Like it was a different thing, and hopefully these guys realize you don't need that stuff to keep going.
No, you don't, and make note. We're talking about this. Make note of guys prior to us. I mean, Kurt Hennig, right? I mean, found in a hotel room in Tampa of a cocaine drug overdose, right? Note to self, right? I knew Kurt well. I knew Lanice, his wife. I mean, she was the darling of all the cheerleaders in high school. Right. She had a sister as well who's every bit as beautiful as her. Never got to date her. But all that said, Kurt, five beautiful children left behind, and so just for the young, perhaps up and coming wrestler out there, just stay away from that stuff.
Yeah. Well, the thing is too, what I think a lot of guys don't realize, when you start running as hard as they do at the top level with all that travel and days on the road, it just breaks you down. Like that stuff does, like it just breaks you down.
It does. Now, and you guys are probably more familiar with the industry and now, and then, but I think it's different. Dwayne, you could probably tell us. I think it's different. Dwayne, do they travel as much now as I did back in my day?
No, they have more days off now. TV time is practically scheduled, and then they'll do a couple. Well, the house shows now, of course, with COVID is really limited. But no, you guys were doing 280, 300, 340 nights a year on there, and it was incredible. Like I don't think they were even getting close to that now. Like it's a lot.
Yeah, even pre-COVID, right? Even pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I remember.
Yeah. Jordan, to put it in perspective, in 1986, I had 454 matches.
Wow.
So for those of you out there who are mathematicians,
Yeah.
right away you're going, wait a minute, there's only 365 days in a year. Correct. That is correct. So double shots on Sunday, double shots on Saturday. I mean, sometimes triple shots.
Yeah,
If you
you're kidding when you say you were running 9 days a week.
Yeah, right. And so, I mean, and there was a day off here or there, perhaps. And I was one who took intentional scheduled days off, and the only reason I could do that is I was in good graces with the booker, whose name would be Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, the Tower of Power. Too sweet to be the son of a plumber from Austin, Texas, baby.
That's one of the better Dusties I've ever heard, actually.
The superpower, the Nikita with the superpower,
Okay, we got to talk about this for a little bit. That's unbelievable. Well, I mean, there's so many. I literally am having like a bottleneck of questions at my mouth right now. So I'm just gonna ask, what was it like to work with Dusty on that level? Because my generation, we hear guys working, okay, you sit under the learning tree, right? Like, what was it like to work and watch that brain go at its peak?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this is just me, just a wrestling genius. I mean, the creativity of that man. I can't, personally, I can't say enough good things. I know he didn't get along with everybody. I know that everybody did not like him, and everyone had their reasons and all of that. That's not me. That's not my story. I came to love Dusty and his family, and I think we had created a great bond when we created the Superpowers and traveled exclusively together for a couple of years. Just think back riding in that red convertible Mercedes of his, with him behind the wheel, by the way, as the booker. And I sat in the co-pilot seat, but by choice. He just liked to drive, but to just dream on things we did on the airplane, and just dream and about wrestling. And I think back to the American Bash. I think to the War Games. Just some of the things he created, the Skywalkers, and just all of that was just so much fun to work against him when we did the arm wrestling thing at first, and then later to partner with him, which again, it just might have, Jordan, created a little jealousy to be his partner. As you might guess.
Oh, I bet, because again, instantly you're in a top spot, And now,
right.
I want to again revert to Dwayne. That night when Dusty needs a partner and Nikita Koloff turns babyface, what was that like?
I was mad. I
love that answer, Dwayne. Thank you.
Always the heel.
But honestly, I guess Nikita just got back from Japan, and I'm not sure if you're aware of Magnum TA's accident, Jordan.
Yeah, 100%.
That's when it went down. And correct me if I'm wrong, Nikita, but I don't think even the boys in the locker room knew you were going to do it.
That is correct. And my first knowledge of Magnum's accident was when I came back off a tour in Japan. We were in Philadelphia when Jim Crockett and Dusty pulled me into a room privately and shared with me what had happened. It took him a few minutes to convince me that it was a shoot, that it was for real. And then once they did, laid out the whole idea of turning face and partnering with Dusty, which I don't know that it had ever been a Russian babyface prior to that. And once I agreed to do it, we also agreed, fortunately there was no internet in those days. But we agreed not to tell, like I didn't even tell Ivan, we agreed we weren't going to tell a soul.
Wow.
And I went on and wrestled for 3 more weeks in all my bookings as a heel, culminating or leading up to that night when I would show up an hour after the matches started. So we really kayfabed everyone, and fan and wrestler alike. until I walked into that other dressing room and eventually walked out of that dressing room to the ring and setting the turn up.
I can't even get my head around what the fan reaction people must have just lost their minds.
What happened, Dwayne?
Okay, other than you hated it and weren't happy, Dwayne, what was the pop like?
Oh, well, you heard of the Road Warrior pop. It was ecstatic. Like, people didn't know what to think, right? The Rock and Roll Express were the darlings of the Crockett's, but from what I can tell that night, Nikita was the darling of the Crockett's promotion that night.
What? And Jordan, my understanding that Tony Schiavone was asked a while back, relatively recent, I think, by somebody in all of his years of wrestling announcing, what was the biggest pop he had ever experienced. And my understanding is he said the night Nikita Koloff turned babyface, and I mean the building went from a hush, like the Ivan Koloff defeat of Bruno Sammartino hush. The building went from a hush to an explosion when I tore into Ole Anderson, and by Tony's account, which I take that to be true, but a real compliment for what happened that night, and totally unexpected, right, Dwayne? Nobody expected it, right, Dwayne?
Nobody, never would have saw that coming. It was one of those moments for me as a fan. It was like I actually, some people say they have tears in their eyes when they're superheroes. I was like, no, not now, not now. I was like, this is not going to be. But yeah, no, the other fans were going insane. And then when word got on the magazine rounds, because like Nikita said, no internet back then, he was on every magazine cover and instantly to the most popular ratings. And then apparently, his popularity rivaled Hogan, based on that. And you would never have thought from the most hated wrestler the year before that he'd become that popular.
And correct me if I'm wrong, merch wasn't necessarily the thing it was back then. Merch is everything now. How many T-shirts were you guys actually selling?
Right, right. And unfortunately, so I'll make a comment on what Dwayne said. Yeah, to go from what I would have been considered at the number one most hated guy by fan polls, right, at that point in time, to becoming in some of the polls, yeah, you'll see it. I mean, it rivaled Hogan for the most popular, right, to say the least.
See, ironically, I have to interrupt you for 1 second because it's a Bruce Hart-ism that's going to put you over right now. He always told us, because so many guys want to work heel, and then when the fans yell mean things at them, it hurts their feelings, and they don't want to work heel anymore. And Bruce always told me, the more the fans hate you, when you turn babyface, the more they're going to love you. And that to me screams volumes about how much you were hated when you turned babyface that night.
No, I appreciate, because I tell people this. I went from a month earlier wrestling in that building with people telling me I was number one in their, if you know what I mean, wink, wink. Yeah. I was number one in their hearts. I was they loved to hate me. I mean, I went from, quick backstory. I mean, I went from, Ivan and I getting death threats at the Crockett office to 6 different matches where fans jumped the barricade wanting to get their hands on me. In fact,
how big were the fans?
Huh?
I said, how big were the fans? Like,
what did they think was going to happen when they got there? They were big on bottles of courage, Jordan.
Wow. That's just poor decision-making.
Poor decision-making. And the very first one did, because I wasn't anticipating it. And that was at the Great American Bash. It's on film. You can see it. A fan actually got his hands on me. And before the cops realized, oh, this isn't part of the show, right? So I say all that to say, to go from that, and then, that night people had their shirts off. They're doing the most muscular in the stands. I mean, they're chanting my name with Dusty's help and orchestration for 10+ minutes. It was surreal to experience that. And I'm glad I did in this sense, that I had the opportunity to be on both sides of it, to experience both sides of it was surreal. It just was.
Yeah, like I can't even, now when you got in the back, did Dusty kind of give you like, I told you so?
No, because I found out years later someone had asked him driving down the road. He was up. He was in the that was in his WWF WWE days. It was years later that they asked him the question. They said, "Did you know? Did you know when you guys did that night that Nikita would get over the way he did?" And he's like, "Absolutely not. All we knew was a roll of the dice. We had no idea. Certainly grateful that it did get over the way it did, but it was a roll of the dice. Nobody knew."
Wow. Because I would, kind of when I look at all your accomplishment, I would say you were already kind of, you could easily say legend before that, just because but that cemented your legacy. I think that run with Dusty was just, second to none. It was unbelievable.
Well, and I want to give a shout out to Bill Apter again, like for real. Bill, I hope you're watching and listening to this interview. But he did a magazine cover. We did two things. He did a magazine head cover. Dwayne, you probably got it. And,
I do.
I figured he would. I figured he did. And Dwayne, what was on the cover, Dwayne? What did it say?
Now you're throwing me on the spot. No, I don't.
It had my head shot. Hold on. It had a tear coming down my cheek. Remember?
Yes.
It said, here's what it said. It said, "I cry a tear for Magnum TA." Right?
Yeah, I have it autographed.
Yep. And so that head, the whole magazine cover was just my head with a tear that says, "I cry a tear for Magnum TA." And then we did one interview, Dusty and I, with Bill Apter. Between that interview and that cover shot, it cemented, as you said, and solidified my career as a babyface, as a heel, just the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, like it literally, I look back at kind of that, and it's just like, okay, people can talk whatever they want and say, but once you kind of had that last run there, man, it was like I watched those matches and you were so over. Like I say this, like it's so over. You're so over. It's disgusting. Like come on.
Well,
I have a question.
Come on, Dwayne.
You keep mentioning Bill Apter. How was he accepted in the locker room because he was basically building your guys' stories when there was no internet, and his magazine covers with you and Dusty, and I have one with you and Ivan with the Road Warriors. Like some of those covers are legendary. Like how was he looked at by all the boys in the back?
Well, from as far as I know, he was very well received. Jim Crockett loved him. Obviously, we built a couple of the different sets for him he was invited to every show that I know of, certainly all the big ones, Starrcade, Great American Bash, all the rest of them. And even I think back, even the Washington, D.C., we did two different ones at D.C. Me and Ivan and Crusher, we did one as heels. And then later, he did one with, in fact, you probably have some, with there's a lot of photos flying around out there with Animal and I with our Ribera Steakhouse coats on, by a food truck and just kind of walking around, in Washington, D.C. as a good guy. And so again, Apter was, I love the man. He did nothing but help and accelerate my career, as well as many others, as you know, Dwayne.
Yeah. And you know what? I'll give Dwayne, you and I have kind of put each other over a bit here. And one thing I'll say about Dwayne, if it wasn't for Dwayne, I don't know how to say this properly, but a lot less people would know who I am, because I remember getting an email one day from a guy and it said, "Hey, you need a website." And there was a link to a website. He built us all websites. He would have like MySpace pages for us. So Dwayne, you're like the definitely the Bill Apter of Alberta.
I'm retired now.
Yeah, you are not. And let's put over CWE a little bit, who brought Nikita up for that tour he was talking about in 2017, because you do a lot of work for CWE now. So it's you contribute a lot to the business, my friend.
Well, that day meeting, well, I can go back a little bit. I heard Nikita was coming, and I actually looked at my phone and I said, "Where's he going? It doesn't make sense. It's not on my feed." And then I looked at it, and it was from Danny Warren, and said, "Nikita's coming to Canada." And I'm like, I honestly dropped the phone, and then I picked it up, looked again, and then I was like, I ran home, and I was like showing Kim, and I'm like, "Nikita's coming," and she was like, "Okay." And then I was like, I couldn't believe this. Like, it built up and built up and built up, and then when I went to the show, as Nikita well knows, I was, that day of the show, I was like a little kid on Christmas. I was nervous as all heck. I didn't even know if I was going to go to the show because my stomach was bugging me so bad. I was like, this isn't fair. I'm going to miss out. I'm going to get sick. And when I walked in, I met him, and it was like the rest from there was just an amazing experience. He spent so much time that night with me and the family, and then he was after the show. He said some prayers for my dad who was sick, and it was just, overall, they say, don't meet your heroes, and at that point, it was like that just totally ruined that concept for me. There are some guys out there that can be your heroes and still worth meeting. So yeah, it's don't want to sound corny with that, but it was pretty cool to meet him.
Actually choked me up a little bit. You'd mentioned prayers for your dad. Nikita, if you don't mind, if we could talk a little bit about your ministry. You're wearing your Man Camp shirt there. And your email, Nikita for Christ. As somebody who's also a Christian, I would be interested in hearing, if you're willing to share with us. I'd be interested to hear, how you gave your life to Christ, and hear about your ministry and hear about your Man Camp, if you're willing to talk about it.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate the opportunity. And just before we transition to there, I made reference earlier, but I want to make sure everyone sees my little memento from that tour behind me here, my Canadian throw blanket here, that I had to make sure I had a souvenir from Canada after meeting. So listen, I had no idea there were so many fans like Dwayne across Canada that even knew who I was, like, for real, because right. I didn't wrestle a lot in Canada. I wrestled a handful of shows, and so that tour for me, thank you, Danny Warren, for putting that together, because that tour for me was a milestone of my wrestling career. And what I mean by that is I wasn't in the ring and active wrestling in the ring, but to be able to be there, travel 21 cities in 21 days across 4 provinces of Canada, 19 cities of which I'd never been to before, and to see your beautiful country, and I say that in all sincerity, was just such a marker for me. Like, it's one of those check the box markers. Right. And so I'm very grateful to all the fans across Canada that just welcomed me with open arms in every one of the cities. I was amazed, like, really, every single city that I met wonderful fans. And of course, that meeting with Dwayne and his family at night, again, has led up to this interview tonight, and an ongoing friendship now that he and I have. That said, we talked a lot about the career and the successes I had in the career, and many of the guys. We talked about a few of the guys: Dusty Rhodes. I mentioned Ric Flair. We mentioned Rick Rude, and I think back, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Diamond Dallas Page. All the guys I was in the ring with, Ron Simmons, we mentioned, Lex Luger, Sting, and I could go on and on and on. Dwayne just recently posted how some of my matches in Japan that I had, beating Jumbo Tsuruta and some of the other guys in my tours to Japan. I think back to my career, and there's a point to why I'm mentioning all of this, all the titles and everything that I had won. The reason I'm highlighting that, it's not to pat myself on the back. It's so that your audience understands, as you have kind of highlighted the success of my career, when I chose to walk away, Jordan, and now, and I did leave, I left under my own terms. It was not an injury that ended my career, although I got injured against a big behemoth named Van Vader.
Yeah.
The Vader man, right?
A notoriously light worker.
Yeah. I mean, I was known to be, some might say stiff or a crowbar. I prefer to call it snug.
I call it
But
good for the business.
exactly. I appreciate that,
It's
Jordan.
good for the business.
But I did get injured that, my last match against him in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, he did injure my neck that night. I did find out the next day I had a hernia. I mean, he's a legit 450-pound guy, right?
Yeah.
And so I had a hernia, had surgery for the hernia, rehabilitating my neck, and at age 33, made an executive decision to walk away from the career.
Right.
I said, I'm done. I'm done. Part of that was a goal. Go back real quick to when I was a young person aspiring to play professional football. And I always said, when I make it, I'm going to walk away on top as a champion. I'm going to be, for the American listeners, the Barry Sanders of pro wrestling is what they call me, right?
Right.
I mean, I walked away at a very young age 33.
Still in your physical prime.
Yeah, and someone said just recently, they go, bro, you walked away. You could have wrestled another 10 or 15 years. I go,
For sure.
yeah, probably so.
Yeah.
And so you've walked away from multiple millions of dollars. I said, yeah, probably so. But looking back, Jordan, when I made that decision, now I'm at a season of my life where I'm like, okay, I've achieved the success, but yet something's still missing. I'm like, why am I not happier? Why am I not thrilled about what I've and don't get me wrong, I look back on my career with great memories, as we have been discussing, this past hour, while at the same time I came to the realization something was missing. Now I didn't, if your listeners haven't figured out already, I didn't grow up in Russia, if you're paying attention. Didn't grow up in Russia. Nor did I grow up in
Russian, right? You learned to speak Russian. You were that committed.
Well, a few words, a few phrases.
Okay.
Signed my name in Russian, developed the accent, and talk with the accent anywhere in public. 3 years post-retirement.
Wow. Kids, that is commitment to kayfabe. Listen.
Yes. I was committed to protecting our business.
And thank you for that.
3 years post-retirement. And so I'm in this season of life where I'm like, what does life hold next for Nikita Koloff? Well, I didn't grow up in church either. I mean, I knew the story. I knew the story. I'd heard the story. The man Jesus, nailed to a cross, spikes driven through his hands, his feet. So I knew the story. I understood the story, but the story had never made the 18-inch trip from my head down to my heart. So there was no change in my life.
Right.
I'd met a Christian couple in other business ventures, post wrestling, invited me to their church. I went, and yes, you alluded to a birthday coming up. My spiritual birth is coming up in just a couple weeks here, 17 October 1993, when I walked an aisle, got on my knees, literally, surrendered my life to Jesus, invited him into my heart, and life has never, for real, been the same since, from that decision on. Fast forward and condense the story, which, by the way, if your audience wants the full story, we'll give them some links and websites. My book, Nikita, A Tale of the Ring of Redemption, has the full story. We'll give a website where they can order the book, autographed copy of it, etc. But I look back now over these last 28 years, guys, and I mentioned the word surreal earlier. Now I look at my life and I go, this is absolutely unbelievable to have the wrestling career that I had, and it, in a sense, pales in comparison to what I've done the last 28 years as a Christ follower and in ministry, because it has now allowed me to take a wrestling career as a platform, travel now to 30 different countries, wow, all 50 states, across parts of Canada, and share the good news of how Jesus changed and transformed my own life. men have become a very critical part of the ministry. What I mean by that is Lex Luger and I, in just a couple weeks, in fact, it launches, the Man Camp launches on my spiritual birthday, October 17th, and where we'll have about 40 men from 9 different states gathered together in a little town called Royston, Georgia. And for 5 days, Lex and I, along with our staff, will pour into these men. Our goal and vision for the camp is to send men home to be better equipped. We're going to teach them, train them, equip them, and empower them, and send them home to be hopefully better men, godly husbands, godly fathers, and make a difference in their communities. And I'm blown away from camps to conferences to being an author of several books, to having my own podcast and radio show, and getting ready to launch the Man Up TV show as well here soon.
Wow. Jeez, you've got every iron in the fire there is right now.
We got all the bases covered. Come on, television, radio,
surrounded
podcast.
anyways.
Right.
For sure. Now, and I really commend you on the Man Camp, because it's something, I grew up in a single parent home with just my mom. My dad was a truck driver. So, factor in that he was an absentee father in the first place. He was a long haul truck driver. So we just didn't see him. So if it wasn't, if it wasn't for my, some of my teachers, and in particular, I was an amateur wrestler in junior high and high school. And if it wasn't for those coaches and some, a few of my friends' parents as well, I would not have been the man I am today. And one thing I can echo in your statement is I wasn't always the nicest guy. And, people want to talk about the Bible. And I always kind of say, like, no matter what you think of the Bible, if you think anything of me, the good parts are because I follow what's in the Bible, because I know there's something bigger than me out there.
Man, wow. That's a great testimony in and of itself. And so here's some names for you: Bill Burke, Jerry McFarland, Ross Forchey, Jay Stewart, Rick Joyner. These are some of the men, what I call BC, before Christ, and then other men after my decision to follow Christ that have impacted my life, to your point. And 3 of them were coaches, to your point, were coaches that began to teach me what manhood was all about. And then the latter 2, since following Christ, what it looks like to live a life the way the Bible defines it. That's a great point you bring up. That's my goal now, is to live my life the way the Bible defines it, not the way the world defines it.
Yeah. Well, and that's, there was a time when I wasn't the nicest guy. I didn't mind, if I had to make a collection for the Hell's Angel, I didn't mind coming to your house. And
sure.
Now I really and truly preach nothing but a gospel of love. Like I still get mad. I have a short temper, and sometimes I spout off things that sound aggressive, but I almost like I'm like a guard dog with no teeth, right? Like I'm just barking,
But Jordan, hey, congratulations, you're human.
Yeah, for sure.
Congratulations. You know what? Here's the bottom line. We're all flawed. We all have our faults, our shortcomings, all of us. And the fact of whether you're listening to this tonight and you're a Christ follower or you're not a Christ follower, you know what? You're human. And being a Christ follower doesn't make us any more perfect than those who are not Christ followers.
Thank you for saying so. Yeah, it's 100%.
Yeah,
we get held to a pretty high standard sometimes.
Right. We're not. People will put you to a higher step, but we're just as human and just as subject to fall short of the mark as anyone else. The good news is we just recognize that we're forgiven when we do fall short of the mark.
I always tell people, like, I'm an idiot, but I'm trying.
Well, we're all it's like that sign on the old signs on the interstate that says work in progress. We're all a work in progress. And then here's Reverend Billy Graham. You guys, some of your listeners may know that name. His wife Ruth Graham, on her stone, on her headstone, it says this: "Thank you for your patience. End of construction."
That's perfect.
So we're all we're all under construction, and when it comes that day that we breathe our last breath, hopefully everyone, we can say thank you for your patience.
Yeah.
End of construction.
And you know what? I cannot think of a better way to end this, sir. I cannot thank you enough for coming on. Dwayne, thank you so much for being on as well. And man, I can't thank you enough just for being my pal. But also facilitating this and setting up this meeting with Nikita and I, because you're a salt of the earth human being, Dwayne. I don't know too many men that are better and what Nikita's trying to accomplish, that are simply better human beings. You're such a good dad to your children. You're such a good husband to your wife. You're really somebody that we should all aspire and look to as well for an example of what a good guy is, man.
Well, thank you.
You know me. I don't say it if it's not true, Dwayne.
No, I know. Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate it.
Well, and again, I want to thank you both. And I know I said I would mention, for all your audience out there, I have what I call a one-stop shop, and that is one website where you can go, whether it's ordering. There's a couple books on there that I've written. I mentioned Nikita, A Tale of the Ring and Redemption. That one's inspirational. There's another one that's motivational called Wrestling with Success, Developing a Championship Mentality. If you want to be challenged and encouraged and motivated, then that's the book for you. I personally sign these books before I send them out. And there are other things as well on the store site, the website. There's a link. We've been talking about the Man Camp. There's a link right there. And one of these days, we're going to get Dwayne out of Canada and to the great state of Georgia, to the Man Camp. He's already been invited. Jordan, you're invited as well. Maybe you come together.
Oh, please. That'd be awesome. Boys trip, Dwayne.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spend 5 days with the total package and the Russian Nightmare. Come on.
Sounds fantastic.
It's it. So there's a link to the Man Camp for those who might want to learn more about the Man Camp. There's a link on the website. And then last but not least, I mentioned the podcast, the Man Up podcast, which has now been downloaded in 58 different countries.
Wow, congratulations.
In only 1 year. In only 1 year.
Wow,
and so there's a link to the podcast on the website. And so everyone's like, well, give us the website. Okay, I'm going to. It's very simple. www.koloff.net.
All right. And I'll post it down there somewhere down below. I'll put it.
Yeah, if you put it in your show notes, that would be great. Put the link in your show notes, and maybe that would be awesome. www.koloff.net. And so one-stop shop, you can find out everything about me right there. And I can't thank you guys enough, and look forward to coming one day back up to your great country, Canada, as well.
Well, I'll tell you, when you come to Canada, you have my word. Wherever you are, sir, I will travel to meet you in person. And if that time doesn't come, and our first meet's going to be at the Man Camp, you have my word that at some point I will come and shake your hand, because you are truly an inspirational human being, and I'm very fortunate to have met you tonight.
Well, and I am too. And I just want follow me on social media. All the links are on the website as well. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, everything's right there on the website. So thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Nikita. Have a great night.
All right. You
Thanks,
guys too. God bless you. God bless you out there to your audience. Thank you for dialing in. Jatoita, the Russian Nightmare, says, I'm coming for you if you don't tune in and dial in to this podcast right now.
Awesome.
Duke, you suck.
You shut your mouth!